The budget process continuing to unfold in Albany. The governor has laid out her plans. Now lawmakers will offer their own spending package. We will hear from the state budget director on all of the behind-the-scenes details that go into funding this state. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. We're firmly into budget season now as the lawmakers work to agree on a budget that will provide public services to residents here in New York. We've already seen the State of the State address and the executive budget address. During that, the governor outlining the priorities for this legislative session, including a proposed plan to fund all of it. Now, advocates and other lawmakers will vie for additional funding for causes that are important to them and their constituents. After that, the legislature will produce its own budget, which will have to be approved before the final budget is due on April the 1st. Joining us now to give additional insight on the ongoing budget process, Blake Washington, the state budget director. Blake, thanks for coming in. We don't get bigger than you to come in here and talk about these things.
Thanks for having me.
And I want you to know, all kidding aside, I stopped at McDonald's on the way here, got a number 4. So my tax money's already helping you out with the budget right this morning. Let's jump right in. I know going in towards the fall, going towards the beginning of the year, they were looking at a budget gap. Is there a gap? How much? Is it a big deal?
Yes, so coming into this year's budget, we had a $4.3 billion budget gap that the governor's budget solves for. We solve for that through a variety of different means. Half of it is derived from better than expected personal income tax returns, which is good news for all New Yorkers. The other half are through a whole host of other actions to refine spending across the state portfolio.
Got you. Looking at the governor's budget that she talked about, some things jumped out at me. Crime seemed to get a lot of attention. Talk a little bit about the funding there.
So the governor's budget, first and foremost, maintains commitments to all sorts of law enforcement efforts that we have throughout the state. First and foremost, I'm thinking of gun violence. Well over $200 million in gun violence prevention initiatives throughout the state, upstate big cities, the city of New York, and that's had some real results. I think it's nearer to $300 million. You can see shootings generally are down, deaths are down. Immediately post-pandemic, they were at epidemic levels, yeah, scary levels, and the governor came in and Governor Hochul addressed a lot of that. That, first and foremost, I think is a good source of pride. The next step is looking at other crimes that the governor confronts on a daily basis. She sees it in her own home store. She sees it among the public at large. Retail theft. Right. Not only is it bad for small businesses, very clearly, but it's bad for consumers. Consumers see the governor and they say, "I'm going into a drugstore, and everything is behind lock and key." Sure. It's highly inconvenient. How can we move the needle on this so that we can return to a level of ordinary business in our engaging with our local businesses? Well, if you don't deal with that as well, we're seeing it maybe more in other states like California. You'll have places like Walgreens or CVS just closing stores, and now the poorer communities are losing their store. 100%. Right. We have to maintain the things that we have, particularly, as you said, in the poorer communities. This is the only game in town. And these businesses took a shot a long time ago to be there. We want them to remain there. We want to support their efforts to obviously keep their inventory safe, but also keeping their staff safe. Staff don't want to be in places where they're under constant scrutiny, where, sure, they're in danger from people that would do them harm. So this budget has a few different items in it to combat retail theft, engaging with local police, having the state police take a broader role, interagency communication, giving some resources to the DAs as well. The budget maintains commitments, speaking of DAs, for discovery reform, making sure our criminal justice process works, and a whole host of other items that the governor's really, really proud of, because without public safety, without people having a sense of safety, everything flows from there, and we need. Well, going hand in hand with the crime has to be mental health, because so much of with addiction and things, that's driving a lot of the crime, and mental health is a huge issue. There's some money for that as well, I saw. That's right. So last year, the governor put in $1 billion. After a long period of underinvestment in our mental hygiene infrastructure, the governor put $1 billion in for bed expansion throughout the state. Coming into this year's budget, one of the thorniest things that we're seeing, and I think parents are seeing, is just the high levels of of mental hygiene problems that are manifesting themselves in our young people. There was a CDC report that had come out a few months ago, about a year ago now, that talked about how our young people, our young women in particular, are contemplating suicide. What are we doing as a community to support our young people? So the governor's budget has a whole host of investments, both in our schools and in our community, peer-related support, counseling, just trying to do a full court press to know our young people, to let them know that we care, that Calvary is here, our community is here. Social media weighs heavily on young people's psyche.
Sure.
How do we support them, and how do we crack down on the algorithms that are so pervasive and make our young people think less of themselves, or take out their thoughts onto other people.
Right.
Those are the things that we have in this year's budget, which we're also very proud about.
Speaking of young people, I don't think I've ever heard either the teachers unions or the school board associations say to the governor or your office, you know what, we've got enough money. It seems like they always need more. That's not a knock on them. If I was them, I'd be asking too, where are we with education? Are they going to be happy with what they're getting?
So I'll start by saying the governor's budget includes $825 million in new resources for our public schools. And that's after 3 years of, the last 3 years, $7 billion in new resources, state resources went to our public schools. On top of that, $13 billion in new resources from the federal government came to our public schools. There's a lot out there. And so this year's budget restrains the growth that would have otherwise gone into place under statute. But we're restraining the growth here because we have to look at we're in sort of overview of our state budget. There are a couple of items that do drive our costs, Medicaid and school aid being foremost among them. We have to align our costs with our available revenues. Revenues have come down to more trend levels after a couple of years of post-pandemic growth. So the governor's budget tries to rationalize some of the school aid spending that we're doing. It recognizes as well that schools have more on hand than they've ever had. Record number of reserves across the board. So we think that this year is a way to just take a step back, not taking a step back on our children or the necessity of educating our children. Don't want to imply that. But what is the state putting forward? Is it being advanced to the neediest districts? Is it being advanced to the districts that have growing enrollment? And that's where our focus is in this year's budget. We got
like less than a minute left, but where's any indication, or is it too early to know where the legislature is on any of this stuff? Do they like what they saw? Are they on your side, or are they going to be fighting on some of these things and wanting to raise this and lower that?
Well, I had the fortunate opportunity. I've worked for the legislature for nearly 20 years, and it'll be an iterative process. We will partner with them to iron out any of the kinks. Being mindful, however, that we have to actually live within our means. We've had a couple of wonderful years of growth in state spending, making up for lost time, very important, and we engage with the legislature to do that. Coming into this year, we want to engage with them again, but also normalizing what we do and delivering the same high level of services to people of the state of New York.
Well, and I'm out of time, but a really brief answer. We can't just raise taxes out of this either, right? You can't tax people to death where they leave the state.
100%. This budget does not include any increases in the personal income tax. The governor does not want to do that in any way, shape, or form.
Boy, you gave me a good short answer. Thank you, Blake Washington, State Budget Director. Hopefully we'll talk to you again down the road as things come together with everything where the lawmakers see your budget.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate you coming in this morning. Addressing the struggle of food insecurity. That's the goal of a proposed legislation at the Capitol. We'll hear from the anti-hunger advocates on the steps they say the state needs to be taking this spring. Also, if you have a comment or story idea for this show, let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. We're also on X, which people like me still call Twitter, at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Food insecurity. It's a problem faced by many New Yorkers across the state. And now lawmakers are looking to help address the issue by expanding SNAP benefits. Proposed legislation would increase the minimum amount of a household they could get. Right now, it's a minimum of $23. That bill would increase up to $100. The push coming as a report from the State Department of Health finds that 1 in 4 adults in the state are experiencing food insecurity.
So my bill would require New York State to cover the balance between the minimum benefit, and again, the lowest benefit is $23, to ensure it at least gets to $100. And again, that's something where the state would make up the difference. Not every person on SNAP is at $23. It's based on your family size and your income. But certainly $23 is not enough to address food insecurity in New York.
Joining me now, an expert panel giving us a little insight and analysis now on the problem of food insecurity in New York State. We have Assemblyman Angela Santa Barbara, Democrat representing 111th, and Natasha Pernica. She's the executive director for the Alliance for a Hunger-Free New York. Thanks both of you for coming in.
Thanks.
Thanks
for having us.
Let's just, the overall question, it's a big problem, isn't it? Food insecurity, hunger in this state. You would think at this point, 2024, we'd have it all figured out, but we do not, do we?
It is a problem, and it's a statewide problem, and which is why we're trying to get some funding in the state budget, increased funding, actually funding levels that we think should have been there the whole time. Unfortunately, we saw a reduction last year. The two programs we're here to talk about, Nourish New York and the Hunger Prevention and Nutrition Assistance Program, we're looking for $75 million in both of those to cover statewide food pantries, food banks. It's an issue that I see in Schenectady in my district. I've been to the food pantries. They're all reporting the same thing. They're seeing the lines get longer, and the stats back that up. In 2022, it was 1 in 10. Now, as of January of this year, it's 1 in 4. And the point that I've made, we had a meeting with the governor's office just yesterday, and the point that I've made to them in my letter to the governor is that these are people that oftentimes have employment, they have jobs, they just can't make ends meet. By the time you pay the rent, pay expenses, there's no more money to put food on the table, and they really have no choice but to go to the food lines that I've seen firsthand. You know, you see families, you see little kids. It's really heartbreaking to see this happen, but with this funding, we can address this problem in New York State.
Natasha, would people be surprised who needs help? If, you know, you have this image of, you know, as Angela was kind of referencing, like that's really, really poor people, but it's not, is it? It's middle class people who cannot put food on the table.
It's your neighbors. You would be very surprised. In fact, here in the capital region, when we saw significant increases when COVID investments rolled back, that's when the food pantry system really got hit hard, not only locally, but across the state. The biggest increases we saw in people seeking assistance were actually older adults on very limited incomes and families with children. We have families right now this past year where both parents are working and their dollars are not going as far. One of the challenges that we're experiencing is food inflation. Food inflation is actually much higher than the regular inflation rates. So if you look at it from a state budget perspective, we've gotten cut in the executive budget, which is negligent when you consider food inflation is at 9.1% compared to where it was at the 2022 budget. So the buying dollars for food, last year's budget was an $8 million net loss in food purchasing power. This year, they're expecting us to do even more with even less dollars. The big impact on the people in the community that we're serving is that food pantries won't have enough food, and pantries are already limiting how much food they're distributing. They don't have as much quality and variety of food when they have limited dollars. And a big issue is healthcare in New York State. Having enough healthy food is the basis for having a healthy life. Mm-hmm. If people don't have enough food, it's going to impact chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, which are big problems in the state.
Well, some of the worst things you could eat are the cheapest things, right? Sometimes it costs a little more money to buy more quality food, and that's part of the issue.
And the other piece I do want to mention is there's a third piece of this, of our push here this year. It's a direct contracting. Have that ability to do that at the local level. It would really streamline the process, give more options, give more opportunity to go to locally sourced food. I do have to give a shout out to the newly formed Schenectady County Food Council that assembled to address this issue, to address the structure of how food is moved around in communities, and they're doing a great job. But it's all tying in with what our local community is doing and what the state needs to do. We do need state support here because, as you just heard, a lot of times they unfortunately have to turn people away, or it just everything is gone and that's it. They have to close for the day. And a lot of the pantries I visited, some of them don't operate every week. They operate once or twice a month, and they only provide a 3-day supply. That's not very much to go with. And then where do you turn to after that?
Do you think people don't understand as well? Like, they'll see, we'll put it on the news, so we're guilty of this, where the regional food bank, which is the big guy, they'll get 1,000 turkeys donated by a supermarket. Oh, that's wonderful. They don't realize, yes, that's wonderful, but there's all these little pantries in these neighborhoods.
That's right.
That, 10 boxes of Raisin Bran would mean the world to them. That can people help locally as well? Beyond the state budget, can people be doing more to help their local pantry?
Yeah, I think donations, they do get donations. I think they all see local donations as well.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize the food bank is kind of like the wholesaler for the emergency food system. So if people are in need, they don't go to the food bank. If people are in need, they go to the food pantries. Right. So the food pantries are kind of like the retail part. The other thing that people don't realize is that food pantries actually pay for most of the food that they get from the regional food banks.
Maintenance fees, they call it, yeah.
And there's also the cooperative section, which is almost acts as a wholesale. So most of the food pantries are actually purchasing through the wholesale part. So pantries need a lot of dollars, and we also are seeing a lot of pantries doing their own wholesaling and purchasing directly with New York State farmers, which really helps. It's a win-win for small and mid-sized farmers throughout New York State. And New York is a big farm economy, so it's helping the farmers at the same time getting really fresh, healthy food out through the emergency feeding system.
And that's exactly what Nourish New York does. It takes the surplus ag products, and puts them into the food bank system. So it's an important program. So that's why this funding is really critical for this year to address this issue, so that we can, when you think about it in the context of the budget, we're asking $75 million for each program. You think about how big the budget is. It's something that we should all be able to agree on, including the governor's office.
Well, in a budget that big, you think they could find that money? Last minute, can you be heard when you're the little guy and there's big lobbyists who are handing out checks to lawmakers, for their support for whatever their particular issue is? Can you break through?
I think our press conference was really effective. Statewide presence. We had people there from across the entire state. So it's an issue that is affecting every community. I think we had a very strong, very powerful message, because there was personal stories shared of people that experience these issues and how they end up having to rely on the food pantry for their daily food. So I think it's a very powerful message. I think we've effectively sent that message to the governor's office. We had a meeting yesterday, so I think we are being heard. The question is, can we get this funding across the finish line when the budget is done? And I'm hopeful that we can this year, because we have so much support locally and statewide.
Well, we wish you luck with both of it. Angela Santa Barbara, Natasha Pernica, thank you for coming in today. We do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with that. Abortion legislation is in the spotlight yet again here at the Capitol. When we come back, we'll be hearing for the push for additional abortion protection following the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Quick reminder, if you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. We are also on X, formerly known as Twitter. You'll find us at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Lawmakers and pro-abortion rights advocates meeting this week to renew their push to bring additional abortion protections to the state. Now, supporters gathering at the Capitol to push for the Equal Rights Amendment that would be on the ballot for New Yorkers in November. If it's passed, it would enshrine the right to an abortion in the state constitution. The push follows other reproductive measures getting passed in the legislature.
Our leaders stood up, banding together and saying, we need to make sure that no future governors, no future legislatures can ever strip away these rights that we have here in the great state of New York.
The Supreme Court, of course, ruling that initially guaranteeing the constitutional right of abortion was overturned in 2022. Stick around, back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit. And a reminder, if you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter. We're at WTEN. Finally, in Empire State Weekly, we are continuing to follow the changes that Governor Kathy Hochul is proposing to the formula that determines school aid for districts. The proposal would reduce foundation aid, the way the state determines additional aid for schools, by over $400 million. Last week, we heard from an education advocate who explains their reaction to these changes.
Frankly, we were somewhat surprised and disappointed with the overall aid package. And I think that's especially in comparison to the great progress that we've made over the past few years. With school aid in particular, we finally, in the current school year, achieved full funding of foundation aid. We were hopeful that would continue going into 2024 or 24-25.
A joint legislative budget hearing on education will be held February 1st. We'll be sure to bring you the latest analysis on the education spending in the coming weeks on this show. For now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We will see you right here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's a full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 TV stations across the great state of New York.